Hello, happy Saturday, everyone. We want to thank you for joining us once again for another relationship ministry seminar. Listen, if you are watching with us, if you are on with us, why don't you just go on and share this with someone else who may be able to or who may need to engage in this conversation. Now, we're going to talk about something that's very important that the church oftentimes doesn't address. We don't do well oftentimes as a church addressing issues as it relates to mental health, mental wellness, especially we don't talk about suicide and self-harm. And so I'm very glad today that we are engaging in this discussion. And so if you're watching, why don't you go on and share it with someone else who may also need to engage. But I'm going to bring on our panel really quickly, and then I'm going to introduce all of them to you. I'm going to start with the lady next to me, Lieutenant Janelle Phillip. As a clinical social worker for over 15 years, Janelle Phillip has been living her passion of helping others. She's had a wonderful career so far, working in various arenas such as child welfare, mental health treatment for incarcerated individuals, family and individual therapy, and as a medical social worker. Janelle currently serves in the United States Public Health Service, working as a behavioral treatment provider, and Lieutenant Phillip is also the proud single mother of one fabulous daughter, Nia. Leighton Kennedy is a saxophonist, yes, but did you know that his secret identity is a psychiatric nurse practitioner? It's true. Over the last 20 plus years, 13 as a nurse practitioner between Massachusetts, Maryland, and recently Minnesota, he's been working with children to adults with mood and anxiety problems, psychotic disorders, trauma issues, and adjustment challenges. He's the co-owner of Anova Life LLC, a psychiatric private practice in Laurel, Maryland, for over 6 years. He always seeks to treat people with the utmost respect and dignity while partnering with them in pursuing the most effective approaches to treatment so that they actually can thrive. It's good to have not only Lieutenant Phillip, but also Leighton Kennedy. Let me introduce to you Jessica Harris. Jessica Harris is a psychotherapist who specializes in reproductive mental health and emotional intelligence. She's been in the field for the last 8 years and has worked extensively with children and adults on the autism spectrum, working with parents of and providing intervention for preschool and school-age children who have difficulties with emotional regulation, individuals and families who have dealt with trauma, and those belonging to the immigrant community. Jessica is trained in EMDR and brain spotting therapies and utilizes these interventions to treat various mental health conditions and concerns. I want to welcome Jessica. I want to welcome you as well. And then let me talk about my man, Dr. Richard Campbell. Dr. Richard Campbell is currently the pastor of the Patterson Seventh-day Adventist Church in Patterson, New Jersey. Not only that, but he also is a licensed clinical professional counselor who currently is the owner and operator of the Campbell Counseling and Consulting practice. Dr. Campbell has written an exceptional book, The Strength of Male Tears. Did I get that right, Dr. Campbell? Yes. All right. An exceptional book on male emotions, and I'm so glad to have him with us here today. And so we're going to get started. Listen, if you're watching with us or if you're joined us, why don't you just click, just tell us in the comment box where you're watching from. And then not only that, at the end of our broadcast, we will be taking questions from our panelists. And so if you're here and you're watching and you have questions for our panelists, go on and put them into the chat on Facebook, on YouTube, and we'll get to them as soon as we possibly can. Now, panelists, for those people, and we're going to jump right into the discussion, for those people who may not know or who may not understand what suicide is, we're going to talk a little bit about suicide and self-harm in the church. But I pulled this definition of suicide from the CDC, and it says simply suicide is death caused by injuring oneself with the intent to die. And a suicide attempt is when someone harms themselves with the intent to end their life, but they do not die as a result of their actions. And just so we get definitions, the definition of self-harm or non-suicidal self-injury, often called self-injury, is the act of deliberately harming your own body, such as cutting or burning yourself. It's typically not meant as a suicide attempt, but this type of self-injury is a harmful way to cope with emotional pain, intense anger, and frustration. I wanted to put that on there so we knew what we were talking about. And I just want to hear from you all. Why do you all think it's important for the church specifically to address not only mental health concerns, but suicide and also actions of self-harm? And then if there's anything else you all want to share as far as introductory remarks, just go right on ahead. And you all jump in. I'm not going to call on you. Just go on and be comfortable and jump over each other.
Listen, allow me to say this. Why should we as a church? Because number one, we are prone to mental health and emotional issues like anybody else. Or let me put it out there. Especially people who belong to what I will call a works-oriented religious culture. The pressure is exceedingly more. In such a culture, friendships are less. You may have more acquaintances. There is loneliness in the crowd because you're talking about a judgmental context. If only because of that, we have to talk about this more than anybody else. That's about what I'll say at this point.
Okay, all right.
I was going to say that, and I like that response, and you just took it to a very deep place, deeper into the conversation that I thought we were going to go. But I think the church has a responsibility to the community, not only the people who are suffering within the church, but on the outside of the walls of the church. And suicide and self-harm is a health. There's a health crisis where suicide is concerned, and the trend continues to go up in this area. And I think it's important and it's prudent of the church to respond to this issue and really start talking about it so we can care for people who are suffering with the causes of this issue.
Okay. Anyone else?
I echo my sentiments. Mental health conditions or concerns really don't discriminate. So it doesn't hit not just people in the church. It's anyone is, susceptible to having an emotional, difficulty. And the church really should take part in recognizing that and first believing that these types of things exist for people. It's not just, emotional difficulties aren't things that are simply just prayed away. And I think a lot of people often get that confused. And it's just as important as going to the hospital if you have a broken arm.
Absolutely.
And let me add to that. The church is bringing the hope of Jesus, right? That's the whole thing. They're bringing the hope of Jesus. They're spreading a message of salvation. Well, how are you going to spread a message of salvation to people who, if you're forgetting the folks who are not even wanting to be here, how can they hear if they're not here? So on just a basic level, we have an absolute responsibility to reach out to those who are on the edge, who are struggling on the edge, because those are exactly the folks that need the hope as much as, everybody does. But when you're on the edge of looking, if you even want to live for the next moment, those are the ones we really need to reach just as fast and actually imminently.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about this. What are some of the warning signs of suicide or self-harm? And why don't you all, if you all have any, share some statistics about suicide that you may have found as well?
Well, some warning signs are excessive sadness, a sense of hopelessness, speaking like where there's no hope, they can't see the future, sudden calmness after there's been a lot of chaos that has been happening, getting together of wills talking about, oh, whenever, I'm not here, I want you to have this, kind of like giving away things in that sense, being withdrawn, dangerous and self-harmful behavior. And I know we're going to talk about that too, but it's also a warning sign. And there's also risk factors. I won't get into that now. I'll leave that to my colleagues. But just a couple of statistics. Within the year 2017, suicide was the second leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24. And it was the leading cause of death for Blacks ages 15 to 24. And that was from 2017 statistics.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to add in and just I want to lean towards actually the self-harm and just looking at the issue of self-harm. Again, it's not an intention to die, yet it's a critical and dangerous issue. And so many times people who suffer, who are dealing with self-harm issues, you may start seeing issues as far as mood changes, sudden mood changes, increases in anxiety. Maybe their other unusual behaviors, like they're covering spots where the self-harm may be occurring. And I'm talking, specific to the cutting and burning behaviors. Maybe it's the summertime and you have a family member, child or an adult wearing long sleeves, and they may not be suffering with anemia, and feeling cold. And so those are some other things that may happen. Maybe they hoard sharp objects, or they're, have hidden places like, underneath the pillow, underneath their bed, always carrying sharps on them. People also, another self-harming behavior actually is picking. So sometimes people may, always have fresh wounds, always picking at certain areas. So those are a couple of other signs of self-harm. I'm sure there's a ton more we can go into because cutting and cutting and picking are probably and the burning are the typical ones we talk about, but headbanging, maybe another one. And I'd say the indirect ones, people with eating disorders. I'm just thinking about self-injury in regards to binging and purging and restricting. So things that don't really always get talked about in the self-injury category, but those are also self-injurious behaviors.
Yeah, for me,
and punching and breaking bones.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, what I found quite a bit of, as Janelle referred to, this matter of hopelessness, talk of hopelessness, attitude of hopelessness, drastic change or negative changes in behavior, I've found to be huge. Now, I could also drop this. When I am particularly alert when individuals frequently report bullying, or especially things like someone would talk about an incestuous relationship that they are in. There are so many codes that could alert and that could trigger so much. So as Leighton says, yes, this thing goes so broadly.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to bring one more thing, and this may come up, this comes up as well, substance abuse. And that people starting to use substances, or there may be a sudden increase in substance use is also a warning sign. And we can expound on that a little later.
And so one reason that I have Jessica on here is because she's our child expert. But we see a lot of times among children and teens, I have plenty of parents that bring their children and teens to me because they are engaging in these self-harm behaviors because they're utilizing it to relieve some emotional or psychological stress. So sort of talk to us about why we need to pay attention to those things and also help those people who don't really understand what it's about.
It's really important, especially paying attention to your kids, because it can look subtle for parents, but for people who are trained in mental health, it might be more of like an obvious sign. So a lot of kids engage in like school avoidance behaviors where they're not wanting to wake up for school, they're not wanting to go, or their behavior becomes more aggressive, they're fighting more often. And I know in the era of social distancing where everyone's staying at home, those behaviors can look like what it either more like conduct issues with adults in authority or amongst the siblings. Some kids have an increase in hyperactive behavior. I know like with the smaller ones, like 4 and 5-year-olds, they're going to start complaining of stomach aches and different aches and pains that really aren't explained by other medical conditions. And the pediatrician is going to be like, okay, well, there's really nothing going on. And some of them will refer out to a mental health provider. Others will just like, take it home, they're fine. You'll see an increase in temper tantrums or even nightmares. So those are some other signs that children are having mental health distress as well, that parents need to pay attention to. And it's not just like, wouldn't be, that can come off as typical of age appropriate behavior. But if you're seeing like a high frequency of it, that's when you should be more concerned about it.
Yeah, what I've noted with this matter of self-harm in children, quite a bit, a cry for help. But I've also noted in some kids, there is a self-affliction, inflicting hurt upon themselves as atonement for something they think wrong about themselves or something that they have done wrong. And often children are not able to verbalize, they're not able to articulate. And the more we ask them to tell us is the more withdrawn they could get, because a lot of times children expect adults to read between the lines, to understand. And if we articulate it, a child may nod and say, yes, that's it. Jessica, I do not envy you in that area. It is really a challenge, and I admire people like you who do quite a lot of work with children.
Yeah, it takes brave. It takes the brave, Jessica, because I know I run like the plague from dealing with children, and so yeah, God bless you, and God bless you. Yeah,
Oh, thank
so
you.
as we sort of talk more about this, right? What are some of the mental health conditions that are commonly associated with suicidal ideations? And of course, we want to talk about some of the big ones, but what are the mental health conditions that are associated? Because one of the reasons that we do this is because we want to make sure that we are on the front lines as a church community of destigmatizing mental illness. And so educating people and talking about it and letting people know that it is common, and treating mental health conditions as health conditions is very important. So what are some of the underlying conditions associated with suicide and suicidal ideations?
I want to start.
Okay,
Oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Jessica. Yeah, go right ahead.
It's adjustment disorder. I think that really doesn't get talked about enough because sometimes some people don't understand what the difference between adjustment disorder is, or like depression or anxiety. While adjustment disorder can have presentation of depression and anxiety that come with it. Adjustment disorders could be easily from switching a new school, getting fired from a job, ending a relationship, having a parent leave the home, or any type of particular life change that really isn't explainable by any other type of disorder. And it can come just be anxiety. It can just present as anxiety. It can present with anxiety and depression, or like a mixed disturbance of I think it's like emotions and depression or conduct. It was emotions and conduct. And so some of that can happen and manifest. Others are different anxiety disorders. I kind of want to touch on, because I know Leighton had talked about the skin picking. There are compulsive disorders that could come off as injurious behavior, like trichotillomania is a hair picking disorder. And it's like it falls like in the subcategory of obsessive compulsive disorder, and so the skin picking as well. And those can be triggered by trauma. And I did want to mention trauma really being a preceptor to a lot of mental health conditions that people experience. And trauma can really look like divorce. There's physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. There's financial abuse. So there's different types of abuse that people fail to really acknowledge or understand. That's really important to recognize and be able to see that. There's different types of the way kids are treated in school. If they're continuing being gaslighted by teachers and other personnel, they're being physically abused in school as well, even bullied. Those are other types of things that people experience. And so these are things that can be traumatic for people. And I really want to emphasize being able to empathize with people. So just because someone goes through something that may not be perceived as traumatic to you does not mean it's not traumatic for that person. And that's what I see a lot of lack of empathy when it comes to mental health and acknowledging the distress that people encounter or experience.
Yeah, Leighton, you wanted to say something, and then I see Dr. Campbell.
Yeah, I did, I guess. Jessica covered it well, and just looking at the issues. And I wanted to kind of expand it broader than diagnosis, because a lot of times you get a diagnosis because you actually saw someone who actually diagnosed you, but there are people who are suffering with these issues who have not seen a professional. And so there's statistics that say, I think it's from NIH or CDC, that point to 79% of the people who deal with self-injurious behavior and suicide suffer with depression, and 89% suffer with anxiety. So both are definitely symptoms. I won't even go to diagnosis, but symptoms that play into when people are dealing with distress and get to the point of wanting to self-injure or to contemplate suicide. The others, I want to go to the issue of psychosis. People who have new onsets of mental health problems. And so when we're talking about schizophrenia or psychotic disorders, people are dealing with a sense of alteration to their reality. So they're not perceiving things in its reality. They're extremes that they may experience as far as mood is concerned. So they may have a manic episode, so they're hyper elevated. They may have delusions, paranoid that someone is coming after them, and it leads them to a place where they want to figure out how they can manage the symptoms that they're dealing with. And many times with people with severe mental health disorders, they start getting into substance use in order to cope. before they're able to feel like they can trust going to a professional to get the help that they need. And many times people who are in that situation, in order for them to go and get help, they need to have a support around them, you know, who they can trust to bring them to that place. So those are those are some other things that we can consider.
Yeah. So that at the end of the day, once you have a mental health issue, there is a potential for a slippery slope, right? I agree with Leighton that people may not have been diagnosed. And for those who are looking on, those viewers out there may not have been a diagnosis. Your family member may not have had a diagnosis. But it's not all about what the diagnosis is or if a person is diagnosed. And that's why I think, Leighton, you touched on some other warning signs, and also Jessica. Jessica, you spoke about, you started with adjustment disorder. And when you said that, in my head, I could hear myself saying, bang. Because you are talking to the times. You are talking to a time when there is serious need to handle, to tackle, to relate to losses at multiple levels and adjustment, you know, with the economic losses that so many people are going through. Listen, you're talking about adjustment. I have a number of my church members, not only older members, but especially people who are single, who do not have a strong social connection outside church. Adjusting to these times is not an easy thing for them. So listen, I have my adjustment challenges as a pastor. I mean, I am drained, and David, you know where I may be going, but you know, I'm not going to go. I'm not only zoomed out. I keep saying, who is sufficient for these things? Because I mean, I think I am an active pastor, and yet so much is slipping me that when a certain member told me sometime last week, I said, long time I have not seen you, Pastor, because you have not checked on me. And of course, the checking on me is not about just seeing, but about calling her, right? And this is a pastor who means well, but listen, she said that, and in my mind, if this sister could say this, 100 others of my members are saying the same. All I'm saying, the adjustment challenge is huge at every level, at every terrain. And here is where we have to go through and work ourselves through adjusting to the multiple challenges that we have at this time. So this is a time, yes, when we need to listen to people and when we need to listen to one another because people need help.
Yeah. You know, anything to add?
Yeah, and what Dr. Cable said is really very, very important. I mean, you know, we're talking about a time right now, and you know, coming off of what Jessica said, but just adjustment. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest risk factors that's actually named, I think it's within the top 5, is actually loss of job. And we're in a time where a lot of people are losing jobs because what that reinforces a feeling like a failure. And we know once those types of thoughts start reeling in our head and we're starting to feel like, how am I going to provide? I'm becoming a burden. I'm out there trying to do this and do that and nothing is coming together. It's never going to work. Then you have a whole thing that builds up. And like Leighton said, you might not even get to the point of a diagnosis, but some of those risk factors are very important for us to keep in mind and to see. So loss of job, which can also lead into substance abuse, and something that I just want to say as far as for risk factors, and we see it a lot with young people. We see it very highly in the Native American communities, is clusters of suicide. So once you start to see something happening in an area within a school or something of the sort, people need to be on high alert and to really check in. I know we're going to talk about, what to do and how, what can we do, but that is a major thing. And of course, family history and any prior attempts. And so what we're talking now is not just about, hey, how you doing, but actually now building relationships as church folk, which in time of COVID can be a little difficult, but there is, I think this is an opportunity for us to actually build these relationships and actually go deeper with folks and not to just be pulled, but I know we're going to come to that.
So I wanted to point, I know you're, sorry, host. I wanted to definitely just point one thing that has been actually provoked in this time through COVID, with the protests, what they're all about. There are actually, we're talking about traumas that are occurring for people as well. And we're talking about social traumas or traumas related to people's ethnic background, people who are dealing with, we're talking about, what's happening with the police. And it's bringing up a lot of issues as well for Black folk, for Latino folk, for people who are immigrants. It's bringing up a lot of issues. And so those are things that actually, as clinicians, we're actually having to assess for. And part of our evaluations and really going deeper into these issues, because people are not only being traumatized by sexual abuse and bullying, but we also have to look at this very issue. It's bringing up stuff from the past, that you and I and other people have dealt with. And it's now being formulated into an issue of, wow, I've been dealing with prejudice and injustice. And it's bringing up stuff that was suppressed from a long time ago. So just wanted I think we need to be aware of that as well.
Sure. And it's the amalgamation of changes that people are going through, the loss of normalcy that people are going through. Like it as Janelle was saying, it does breed hopelessness. As Dr. Campbell was saying, it does breed a lot of hopelessness. But one thing we have to understand is it's not only the, I think, second leading cause of death between like teenagers up to 24, but it's high even in the elderly population. And if you think the elderly have so many other health conditions, how in the world is suicide in the top 10? Well, oftentimes our challenges are compounded. And so they even see people who are elderly, people who are widows or widowers. Their rates of suicide is highest among all the elderly. So I think it's important for us to understand that it touches us not only across culture, it touches us across age discrepancies, disparities. It also touches us as far as religion. Just because we know God and we claim to have a relationship with God doesn't mean that there is not still hopelessness. It touches us from the pew also to the pulpit. Recently, there were pastors that have even committed suicide. And so I think it's very important for us to have this discussion and then also help people frame it as to what then can the church do to help. So what role do you think the church should play in destigmatizing mental health concerns? There's a church out there that needs to learn how to create a safe space for people to come in and say, I'm hurting. I can't handle this. And we not be judgmental or pass them off or tell them to pray or tell them you need an exorcism when, Leighton, this is for you, they need medication. how do we, because like, let's just be honest. We could be real too spiritual with some of these things. You don't tell people, let me pray for your arm and it's falling off, but yet we'll do that for people who maybe, I was going to call on you, so I put your name on the screen, Leighton. But we don't do that for other people. So let's talk about how it is we create safe spaces within our sacred spaces for people to say, you know what, I need help.
Well, you call on me?
No, if you want to.
Well, I'm speaking anyway, so I'll just speak, and I apologize. But I was just thinking about the fact that we need to continue to uncover the issue and have people speak to the issue who actually suffer. And are in recovery, who, is not having just professionals who are talking from their own clinical understanding, but people connect with people with personal testimony. And we have to start there, identifying that there is an issue and coming clean and destigmatizing this issue, because church has been far too long seen as a place that's very judgmental. And we have to be able to get to a place where we start removing judgment so people can feel safe enough to be able to enter. and get help and be connected.
Gotcha, absolutely.
And Leighton, let me add to that. One of the good things, especially within a lot of churches, is that there's members, and there's a member somewhere who is an expert on this, or within the vicinity, or within the community, bringing community folks who can come in and help, who partner with the community people. If there's no social worker, if there's no nurse, if there's no doctor, if there's no counselor in your church or any kind of professional, then partner with. But the good thing is that we don't have to do things on our own. And a lot of times churches feel, oh, if the pastor can't do it, oh, it's never going to get done. Well, no. Use the professionals there. There can be programs that could come up. Do a quarterly program. Have somebody on call every week. We see so often when people come to church, and we can look at them. From lead and praise team, and I know, pastors people who've been up front. You look out, and you're looking at someone, and you could tell this is not that they're just bored or they don't want to hear it. There's something wrong. There's something going on. Where is the space for them? And this might be the only place that they have gotten a chance to actually feel that. They might have been numb the whole week, and they're getting there, and they're feeling something, or we see them crying, and it's not like tearful. No, there's a something wrong cry. Where is the space for them to go to get help, to be connected with resources, to be connected with help? There are some churches who have folks who are in there, and every week there's somebody that's on call, for any emergency that can arise, they're on call. And I'm not talking about sitting in there and having a session with them, at 11:45 a.m. per se. I'm talking about having a conversation, finding out what's going on, and being able to connect them to local resources, to community resources. The good thing is nowadays, if you have any kind of insurance or anything of the sort, you can easily go online and start to find people and to connect. But sometimes it just takes somebody there to hold the hand and to help them through the process and to follow through, to say, hey, your appointment is coming up on, this afternoon. You ready? You ready? If it's hard, call me, text me. I'm going to check on you. I'm going to hold your hand through this. That makes the difference between living and dying for so many. We pass by things really quickly, and we just want it to be done. We don't want to deal with it. We got our own stuff. But as somebody who lives and deals in stress, I'm not suicidal. So if it's going to take me an extra 5 minutes, even though I'm stressed, to deal with someone and to help somebody who it may be a life or death situation, what does that really take out of me? For those of us who are not at that moment, what does it take out of us? And so I think those are the places that the church can really help with that. To help with the whole, talking about educating and providing actual resources towards mental health and suicide and self-harm.
I want to add too that in addition to like the programming, things like that, there's different types of support groups that I think the church should be able to facilitate. As somebody who specializes in reproductive mental health, I have a lot of Black moms out there that feel really disconnected from support, especially during COVID. And being able to connect with other moms is highly beneficial. And so especially community is so important when it comes to mental health. And just being able to connect with people could be the difference between somebody contemplating suicide or wanting to stay alive, or choosing to just make the choice, okay, I'm going to try one more day. I know other churches have clinicians on staff who or have a clinic on site, or have a clinic in a community where different people can go. I think that'd be a great move for a lot of churches. For someone who sees children, I've worked in the school system. I've worked with kids in school. It'll be great for our schools to have a licensed clinician on site to be able to provide that support. I've heard a lot of things. I hear a lot of negative things about children that are completely false. Like, children can't possibly experience anxiety. What do they have to worry about? Children can't be depressed. Children don't experience this. It's all a complete lie. I've worked with kids from as early as 2 years old. If there is something going on in your household that is impacting you, please believe that it's impacting your child. Just because your child cannot talk or have the words to communicate what is going on with them does not mean that they cannot feel the distress. Mental health begins at conception. I don't want me to go any further. I can be very long-winded about this one.
We're gonna come back. We're gonna come back to that.
Yeah, but I think this is an important discussion here. Still on the question, Doc.
Yeah.
What role does the church, or could the church play in destigmatizing Listen, we need an attitudinal change. Listen, we almost need a theology on mental health. We need to come to the point where we tell some of our righteous members, depression is not something you exercise. And if it is not exercise, then you don't have faith. And we quick to judge between one another who has faith and who has not. We have to understand that mental health illness is as legitimate as physical illness. Listen, we also have to understand that just as you have some physical illnesses that could be healed, but others just have to be managed, so it would be true also in the mental health sphere. It's important for us to do that, for us to be aware of that, and for us to share. I mean, I'm preaching to myself here because as a pastor, to let my members know that, listen, people could be mentally ill and still in a spiritual relationship with the Lord. You would hear me say that there are people who are emotionally traumatized. Some people may not even get their emotional healing.
Yeah.
And yet they're in a spiritual place with the Lord. Because if you are not able to resolve or to deal with, or the other party is not willing to work through it with you, you may remain with the emotional baggage. And so we have to be able to let one another know that our people must not be judged in the way that we have now. In many of our situations, I heard, I'm confusing Jessica. Notice I confused you with Janelle earlier on in terms of the names. But Janelle, I heard you. It is important that we provide an environment. It is also important that we have mental health people, or we are able to refer our people out. But within, we could inflict people emotionally. We could wound people among ourselves. And something I hinted before when I just started is that we may be in a congregation of other people, but we don't have one person with whom we could share our pain, or we could share that we are hurting. Because once you share a doubt, once you show something that is a mental health or an emotional liability, immediately we want to hit one another with a Bible text. And so we have the right proof text, not understanding that how we could help often as a church is not to run off to the Bible, but just to sit. Sometimes the person just needs a listening ear and embrace. We going back to Job. All they need, they don't need you to get into the Bible. They need you to sit with them, groan with them, gripe with them. Church members need to know that when people are going through their mental health illness, you are not there to defend God. You are there to rally around your brother and your sister. In fact, you got to cry out to God on their behalf, not push them down further than where they already are. At that point, in the person's mental health situation, you are not God's representative. You are the person's helper. You may be the only strength that the person has. It's an attitudinal change that is necessary, but we need to have it on a theological platform, because theology is what Adventists listen to.
Mercy.
That is, I'm filled, Pastor Campbell. Can we go home? The servant has been spoken. He's so right. And did he say offering? I thought he said. So coming from the pulpit, I think that is such an important thing, because many people will respond to what they hear from the pulpit as well. I think for far too long, we have treated the disease of the mind as if it's not connected to the rest of the body, treating the brain like it's not an organ in the body. And the brain is an essential organ, and it has a great impact. It's the driver behind every organ. And if we say something's wrong with the heart, we're accepting of that. If we're saying something's wrong with the pancreas, we're accepting of that. But because of our cultural upbringing and because of the stigma, we don't talk about the brain as an organ that's being affected and ravaged by disease. And we have to be able to continue to do these platforms. We've had several of them. I'm blessed to be a part of it. And thank you, David, for being able to do this again, because the re-education of our church, the re-education of our communities, because the reality is there are people outside the church who have the same thought process. And we have to be able to get to a place where we start talking about this as not some floating problem of somebody who's crazy, but that we're talking about this from the standpoint of this is a medical problem.
Absolutely. And I want to add to that mental health needs to be recognized. It needs to be taught. It needs to be enforced just as much as we do the health message, because mental health is health.
Yeah.
That's right.
Listen, I want to thank you all for that. And Dr. Campbell, I want to applaud you for your courage in stepping out there. But one of the things that we have to make sure we do, and this is one of the objectives of my department at the conference, is to make sure we do everything we can to destigmatize mental health issues so that we don't re-traumatize people. You come traumatized to the God who can heal you of your trauma, and then the people who say they're with God just further your trauma. So if I come with abandonment issues and then you talk about me in your little potluck circles, then I feel abandoned and rejected all over again. So we have to do better as a faith community, making sure that we understand that everything doesn't need to have an answer. There's great productivity in keeping your mouth closed and just listening to people instead of having to have something to say. I'm not going to get fired. So you all, so Jessica, there was a question about you expanding a little bit more on what you said. We're going to take that after our break and when we do questions. That's going to be our first question. So just prepare for that. All right. So for individuals who are suffering with that mental health condition, who are contemplating suicide, what are some things that they can do, including how is it that they can go about developing a safety plan and also helping them to get resources to deal with their hopeless thoughts or their depressive thoughts?
I think naturally we're all going to say the first thing to do is get connected with a professional therapist. Having a support system is very important, and being able to recognize the types of support that people can give you is also very important. But getting connected with a therapist, getting connected with someone who can prescribe you medication is going to be very important, because you don't know if you have a chemical imbalance. You don't know all the time, those types of things, or you may have been exposed to complex traumatic situations or ongoing traumatic situations, and that can just be pushing you over the edge. So getting that professional help is going to be, my number one recommendation.
And I'm going to actually say, with that, going to the doctor first, there are sometimes those things there might be something chemical or something organic that is going on that is unaware, just like you were saying, Jessica, going to the physician first, to the doctor. And let me say something, Black communities, we're Black right here. Black communities will be walking around with an ache in their hip or their knee or their leg for ages and will never drag themselves to a doctor. We don't have that kind of time with mental health when somebody is starting to not feel well. We don't have those type of time. I don't think you have that type of time with your leg either, because next thing you know, you can getting chopped off. You don't know if it's diabetes, you don't know what it is. But I think, especially regarding mental health, we don't have that type of time. We have to make going to a doctor a regular practice of ours. Doctors will ask the questions. And if it is a doctor that you are not comfortable with, go to another one and to another one. And this is sometimes where the community comes into play, because for somebody who is not feeling who thinks that they might be feeling depressed, who is continuing to go down and down and down, I always say this, it's hard to do these things when you're not feeling well already alone. This is when we have to reach out and connect. This is when we have to say, hey, I haven't seen this person. I haven't heard from this person. Have you? To hold their hand and just to get them initially to a doctor for the initial assessment to find out, is there anything organically going on? Okay, no. So let me go ahead and move now to I think we need to take this to a psychiatrist. Here's some recommendations, and then to go on from there, as Jessica said.
I think on the prevention, sorry.
You're going last on this because I want you to end with medication. So we're going to go to Dr.
Meditation.
Campbell,
it is meditation,
and then come to our psychiatric nurse practitioner, who I send all my clients to personally.
I am just thinking about some suicidal assessments I did some years ago from a certain facility. And the trend I saw in that when you ask people the question about what is your main reason for living, and there are more people who would say family, right? What I found second on the list was I don't know. Right? I don't know. You find there are those who would say, I hope for better, something like that. But it is lower down the list. And it was amazing, even for Christian people, lower down the list, I would hear God and heaven, all right? Almost as if when someone has reached a certain state of despair or a certain state of hopelessness, even church people, because they think that they are judged, right? They want an escape, and their thinking is, God does not provide the escape because I'm already thinking contrary thoughts. So number one, family. And that is where someone talked about social support being so important. And so people who think that they are fragile emotionally and they are at risk with suicidal ideation, finding someone among them who they can trust, who they can share with, is often so very helpful. But when you're not connected with a family member, at least there should be a church member, but somebody that you are connected with. You may know that you are supposed to go to a mental health professional, but you seem to you don't have the will to get there. But if you could have someone else invested in you whom you trust, that is a kind of relationship you need to start cultivating now, and take that seriously. You got to cultivate a relationship with somebody outside of the clinician's office. It's a desperate need you have, and it is something that you need to do from now. That is such a critical thing in terms of preserving you and keeping you.
Yeah. Thanks, Doc. Yes, sir. Hey, Leighton, I need you also to talk to some people who are on the line that think that medication is evil, and help them.
Go, Leighton.
All right.
Ball in your court.
So I did want to respond to the first part, and then just that emergency response is important. So just if you're in active place where you are contemplating suicide, going to the emergency room, calling 911 to get that immediate help and evaluation. Safety is important. Safety first. I just think that's a real important thing to be able to look at. even with, if you're a family member and you're seeing someone in that active state, it's important to get help of the professionals emergently. I just think that's another place to go to look at as well. In regards to medication, there are people who think medication is evil, and I really won't get into that at this point in time. That's a broader question, but medications are commonly used and can be very effective in treating many of these disorders that are leading people to the place of suicide. It's one of the strategies, not the sole and be all and end all, but it does help with people who have extreme moods. It helps to create a tranquility for people who suffer heavily with psychotic disorders. It helps to really bring people out of deep depressions. It can eliminate, it can reduce, to get people to a place where they can cognitively begin to make decisions in their treatment. What happens is when our brain is on fire, right? Our frontal lobe we cannot plan, we cannot process. Our cognition goes down and we are in a more impulsive state. And so the goal is to be able to bring that impulsivity down, to bring down the anxiety, and to be able to treat the place of death, bringing people out of those places of desperation, so that they can now positively engage and begin to learn and grow to build their life. If you choose not to use medication, that is fine. And I think that's a conversation to be able to have with the professionals as well. And, not everybody will agree, but I think it's important to be able to research and look, because the goal is to get treatment and help, because the last thing we want is another lost soul to suicide.
Yeah. So this was very rich discussion. I want us to have one more sort of conversation before we open up for questions. And so we are going to take questions in a second. So if you have questions, just put them into the comment box on Facebook or on YouTube. For individuals who may not suffer with a mental health condition themselves, but they want to develop, or they want to support someone in their family, in their circle of friends that is suffering with a mental health condition or is contemplating or suicide, what is some advice that you all can just give them, practical advice of things that they can utilize to sort of help those people in their circles?
I think you alluded to one thing, the act of listening, I think, is so important. Many times people who are in a lonely place and are in a place of contemplating these things, and if they have a listening ear and one who's willing to spend the time to listen calmly, that can be definitely a practical thing. Removing all judgment and trying to get into a place where you can listen to what the issue is for that person.
I would like to add asking the direct question. And, one of the things is, thank God for the internet. There's a lot of resources on the internet. We have the Suicide Lifeline page that's through the federal government that actually can talk you through some of those things as far as asking the question. Thank you, Dr. Defoe. But asking the question directly, are you thinking about committing suicide? That is a direct question, and we've become very uncomfortable with asking that question. We need to become comfortable with asking that question. If the person says yes, your biggest job is to not leave them at that moment. Your next job is to call that lifeline, call the professionals, call everyone, call 911, call these places to get somebody there to ensure that they don't do it at that moment. But we have to become comfortable with asking the question, are you thinking about committing suicide? And asking that question is not going to make them think about it. People who are thinking about committing suicide are not waiting until you ask the question to talk about suicide for them to actually say, oh, you gave me something I didn't think about. If they're thinking about it, they've been thinking about it. They just might not have voiced it. I also want to say, encourage them, reassure them. Dr. Campbell touched on it before, but just being there, being with them through it. Going through somebody, people who are you're a little concerned with, maybe talk with them about, this is where you get for the professionals, but ask him, hey, do you have a gun in your house? So, if you're on the phone with somebody, hey, what you doing right now? You sound real low. I'm going to come on by. No, it's okay. I'm going to come by. I got my mask. You put your mask on. I'm going to come stop by. Come outside and talk to me if you don't want me to come in, and just start to have a conversation to see where things are. But I think one of the main things is really becoming comfortable with asking the direct question, and as each of us to have a resource that's handy to be able to contact for additional help for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think the listening and the asking, it's important. First, that listening, because again, the person needs to know that they have value. Listen before you jump in, as the person shares their feelings, shares their heart. And of course, if they are not talking in clear terms, indeed, as just said, ask the question, ask the question. What I would add is that if the person tells you, and of course I'm talking to lay people here, I guess the majority out there would be lay persons. The person says, well, you have the evidence. Then try to get the buy-in of the person in terms of, you need help. Let's call so-and-so. I can call a suicide hotline for you. Can I do the call? And, try to get the person to buy in so that they can see the need and that you are with them, that you are willing to help them through by helping them to find whatever the specific resource. Of course, if the person is resistant, then, it is where you may need to seek third-party help on their behalf. But it's so much easier if the person could say, I don't want to do it, but I trust you, help me so that we could work this through together. But again, well said, I go with this, listen and ask the direct question. And please, the attitude, you yourself must not be panicking. You yourself need to show some calm. That's so vital, because they are already tripping. You cannot afford to take them on fast lane.
Yeah, I think these are all great points that have been made. I want to add too, if someone is coming to you, don't tell them everything's going to be okay. Just pray about it. Don't worry about it. Like that's toxic positivity. That's really just that really invalidates how they're feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do is invalidate their feelings, not the act of wanting to carry out suicide, but the feelings that have led to these thoughts and the plan that they have. That's really important. That's the best way to really provide some emotional support for someone in that situation right then and there. I know in light of police brutality, not everyone is really wants to dial 911. I'm not going to say not to do that, but if you can get in touch with a mobile crisis unit before resorting to 911, that is another option for you as well. I know not every jurisdiction or county has one that is locally available to all residents, but that is an option. I've also called a non-emergency police number for someone I knew who was in a situation like that as well.
Yeah, just don't wait until next month's whole night prayer.
And Jessica, just to offer what you said, I hemmed and hawed at that, but I'm not in the era right now of calling 911 unless it's like imminent. That's just me. I would prefer, like I said, call that person, go over there, and I would rather you take them to
Yep.
somebody. Take them to the
I was gonna
emergency
say
room.
that.
Take them, like, you said late earlier, go actually take them to the ER before calling 911. They're not actually holding a gun in their hand at that time or something, that is completely imminent and there's space for you to be able to act. I would say to do that. And let me just say this, as Bible-based people, one of the things that I have heard and have found to be very unhelpful when somebody is feeling very low is to try to compare to other people who might be worse. I just want to say that because that is something people do. It is a hashtag people be do. Somebody's worse off than you. People be preaching it. Oh yeah, they worse off. Well, I'm still horrible. So if I feel like I'm trash and they're trash, does it matter if I feel really badly at that moment? No, at that moment, I feel awful. I feel like nothing is there. And trying to compare it to somebody else who is worse off is, I have never seen in that space where it is actually very helpful to someone. And so I just wanted to add that.
Yes, and I do want to say too. Oh, it's okay, but I want to think, especially for parents. For parents to find that their child has suicidal ideations or has been contemplating suicide, please do not yell at your child. It's really just going to push them off and make them feel worse. Don't say which family members are going to be disappointed if they're gone, or that's really, really very unhelpful statements. The best way you can really support your child is to create an environment where your child has a voice. A lot of parents, especially in the Black community, is a lot of do as I say, not as I do. You're not allowed to talk to yourself. You can't express yourself. You're not allowed to be mad. That is all unhealthy interaction. It needs to stop. The best way to build emotional intelligence is your children is to give them the space to talk, give them the space to reason, and allow them some room to question some of your parenting. And don't be mad when you get corrected by your child, or when your child knows that you're wrong and you know that you're wrong. We are not perfect people. And you need to accept that we are not perfect and not let your ego interfere with your ability to parent well.
Huh. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's good. I wonder if my mom is listening. That's very good, very useful advice, especially for parents. And as we talk about these issues, we're planning a symposium like this on Black family trauma, and some of those things that we're going to talk about, we don't have the same access to resources that other people have. And so we have to make sure that as a faith community, we make sure we provide those people who are in our sacred spaces with the resources. And so I think someone even mentioned in the comments that we need to have a clinical directory. We do have one. We do have one on the conference's website. It lists clinicians that we have vetted in all of the states that the conference covers. And so you can go there to our dedicated suicide page. Visit aec.org/suicide. Listen, we're gonna take a real quick break, 30 seconds. Let me play this video. We're gonna take a real quick break. We're gonna come back, and then we are going to take questions from our viewers for the next 10 minutes. Just you all give me another 10 minutes if you all don't mind. We'll take questions from our audience, and then we'll be done. All right, so we'll be right back.
The Relationship Ministries Department of the Allegheny East Conference is a family of ministries that seeks to engage, enrich, and empower families, men, singles, couples, and parents to have healthy and whole relationships. To access the many resources we have available to you, your church, or your family, visit us on the web at www.visitaec.org/relationshipmin.
All right, so really quickly, we're going to go through some of these questions. Jessica, I told you that I was going to give you the first one that someone had brought up. Let's see, where is it? Let me find it. Explain more about mental health beginning at conception. Interesting perspective. But don't go on your complete soapbox, Jessica. Just give them like the wrapper or something.
I can do that. Okay, so a lot of parents can experience what you call perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And so if someone has a history of like anxiety or depression, for example, prior to conceiving a child, that can really interfere with the pregnancy process for both male and females. So that's really important. And then even after conception, postpartum depression is one of the most popular conditions known that comes up in a postpartum period, but there are other conditions that come up, like different types of anxiety disorders, OCD, psychosis. Those all take place, and it can be because of the history of mental health or because of hormonal changes after having a baby or during the pregnancy process. Even during breastfeeding, if mom is going through a lot of stress, there's a element called cortisol that can go into the breast milk, and that's how anxiety and depression hormones can transfer to the baby. So that's just a summary of how mental health begins at conception.
All right. All right. Let's see. I know I saw another one. Is there a way to help someone who is against getting professional help? Obviously, not if they're in an immediate crisis, but is there a point where you have to respect a friend's choice to remain in pain? Man, very good question.
Well, oh, you can go ahead, Lee.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, everybody has choice, the power of choice. And so if your friend is not in a crisis, we all have authority over our own lives as far as the power to make bad or good choices. You can't force someone to go in and get professional help. Hopefully, at some point in time, if we're, sharing, trying to be present for them and showing concern, and maybe they'll get the hint that at some point in time, the idea may be nurtured that they may need to get some help from somewhere. Sometimes just being a friend, and being present, being near someone and showing that concern may lead somebody at some point in time to saying, okay, you know what, maybe I do see the problem and I can't deny this anymore.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. Yes, and do not feel disrespected if the person does not, they're not interested in sharing too much with you. Next time you meet them, they are totally shut down and they don't want to say anything. Don't send the person on a guilt trip. You already know the person is going through issues internally. You just, as Leighton says, you just let the person know you're there for them. Please do not pry. Please do not put them under more pressure than they already on. If they don't want to join the prayer group that you are in, that's fine. Just be there for them. Give them some breathing space.
That's right.
Don't call them every 10 hours to find out if they're going right, because you yourself will sound as if you're panicking, and you know what we have said about that already. Be a support, but just know the person may not need you as a buddy at that particular point, but they must know that they can turn on the switch to you at any time because you're an arm's length away.
All right, here's another one that came in. What can I say to a friend that told me she is depressed? She went to see her doctor, but according to her, she answers the questions and tells the physician what she wants to hear, so she can outsmart the physician. Her reason for doing this is she doesn't want to take any medication for depression. Is she looking at you, Leighton?
Yeah, no, I saw the medication in the question. The reality is, I get it, but having a moment of depression or dealing with depression doesn't mean you're going to get on medication. It's not 100% sure, but I think it's important to at least get evaluated. If you don't want to be on medication, but you want to at least begin to do some of the work, because healing comes also in variable ways. We need to look at what the source of the depression may be, and it could be something very medical, something like your thyroid hormone is off or some other hormonal issue, and that can be corrected. But there are other things that we have to look at in order to be able to help you with that depression. And the short of this is that there are lifestyle things that you can do, but I would encourage that person to still see a therapist, begin to do some work with that therapist, and discover other ways until you reach the point where you feel and you're convinced that medication may be indicated.
Yeah, there is also the uninformed thinking that once you go to your primary care, every solution would be medication based. And so you run ahead and assume that, but no, it's not every doctor out there automatically prescribes some psychotropic for you to take. And so indeed, you should not shortchange yourself in any event. The reality is, if the doctor does prescribe medication, the doctor is not authorized to administer it to you. So you know, you are the one who decides at the end of the day whether you are taking it. But you need to walk the mile. You can't shortchange yourself like that.
Yeah. Listen, this was a very incredibly rich discussion. I want to thank you all for giving us your time, for giving us your expertise. I'm going to just walk around just really quick. There are some resources that I know we have available out there for individuals who are struggling. If you go onto our website, visit aec.org/suicide. You can get a lot of suicide resources. If you go to the relationship ministries page, you'll get a lot of also mental health resources that will provide you with a lot of stuff, as well as our clinical referral directory, which is on there where we have vetted clinicians in the conference territory for you. But what I want to do is I just want to go around really quick. I want to thank Janelle. I want to thank you, Dr. Campbell. I want to thank you, Jessica. I want to thank you, Leighton, for coming on. Listen, if you're in the Maryland area and you need a psychiatric nurse, Leighton is your man. I send all my clients to him. If you are in the Maryland area or the DC area and you need a child psychotherapist, I send every call that comes in, don't I, Jessica? For every child, they get her card and her information. If you are there in the northern New Jersey area, Dr. Campbell is there for you. Janelle, where you at? Miami now? Yeah.
I'm in Miami, but I don't hold a license in Florida, but I can definitely point you wherever you need to go.
Yeah, so when you're doing
and I
that,
can listen and be a friend. I can listen and be a friend in Florida.
Oh, that's good. All right, that's nice. That's kind. All right, so what I want you all to do is I just want you all to give everyone just one takeaway. Give us one thing that you want people to walk away from this conversation with. Just take however long you want. Just give people one thing that you want them to walk away from this conversation with. We'll go in a circle. So we'll start with you, Janelle, and we'll come around.
I'm going to keep it really, really short. I just want folks to know that you're valuable, that you're wanted, you're needed, and you're loved.
I would say to you, you're going through emotional, psychological pain or distress. I would say to you, don't waste your pain. Some of you would have heard me say that. You cannot be going through your pain for nothing. Challenge yourself to milk your pain and drain from it every last ounce of benefit that you could get, because somebody has ordained you to live to see tomorrow. And you could go into tomorrow with the benefit of the pain that you are experiencing now and over time. Don't give up on you when your best days, as far as God's planning is concerned, are ahead. And to those of you who have people in your circumstance going through their situation, that L word, listen. Don't be judgmental. You need to be the person's ally, not the person's judge.
Wow.
Wow.
I want to add, yeah, very powerful. I want to add to, in addition to just, being a person's ally and listen to your child, pay attention to the things that your child is not saying. That's one of the really important things I really want to stress to parents, is really being in tune with your child and recognize that if you're going through something, that your child likely is too. So take that moment to be in tune with your child, to spend that time with your child, because that's going to build their self-esteem. It's going to build their desire to talk. And also for those who are struggling, there is support out there. You don't have to do this alone. There are people who are willing to walk beside you to help you get to that path of healing that you need to be on. And death is not your only option.
Thank you.
You are not alone, and we're here to be with you. We're professionals, but we're also part of your community, and we may be experiencing, we've experienced what you've gone through, we've witnessed what you've gone through, but our goal is here to be here so that you're not feeling alone any longer. Our goal is to be able to connect you with resources where you will feel connection, because in connection, we can heal.
I want to thank all of you for joining us. I just want you all to know, everyone who's listening, needing help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is most definitely a sign of strength. If you need help, make sure you get it. Don't think that you need to do it by yourself. And then by all means, if you need to connect with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, it is there on the screen. It's 1-800-273-TALK 8255. Remember that September is also Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And so if you want to get more resources, you can go onto the conference's webpage and you can get more resources. I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for coming on. This was a great and rich discussion. And I want to let those of you who are watching know that we will have more relationship ministry seminars coming up in the next couple of weeks, and also be on the lookout for our men's discussion, for our Black family trauma discussion, and then we'll also be having a family life certification program coming up very soon. I want to thank you all of our panelists. We'll wave at each other as we say goodbye to each other. I want to thank you all for coming on, and I want to thank, of course, those of you who have come to watch. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.